Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Aad Fataya and I've started this channel to talk about technology and software development. I'm a full stack developer with an experience of over 20 years in different industries. In this first video I'll be talking about building reusable component in React, and then I will talk you through how to implement higher order components. I will be starting with the theoretical part and then will be deep diving into practical example. So I hope that you will like this video and benefit from the information in it. A really important aspect of becoming a skilled React developer is understanding some of the design patterns and methods that have emerged as React has matured. Some of these patterns are specific aspects of the React library itself, but some are just patterns that React developers have adopted and spread over time. When I was thinking through these patterns, I realized that they all have a similar goal: to avoid repetition. Now you may have heard of the drying pattern, which is short for don't repeat yourself. Well, all these emerged patterns exist to help with this one principle: to keep your React code dry. So what exactly does that mean? Well, keeping your code dry isn't about being a lazy developer. It's actually a super helpful principle when you are writing a large application. The more you have to write the same code over and over in one program, the more places you have to maintain that code. If you decide to change the way to do things, you have to go to every one of these places you wrote this same code and make the same changes over and over. This means that there is more room for human error and therefore more room for bug to creep into your program. Anyway, I think you get the point. So over time there have emerged two very popular ways to help your code remain dry, which are inheritance and composition. These are not referring to React only. These are referring to code in general. We will not go to these in details, but as a quick introduction, inheritance is what drives object-oriented programming. It includes ideas such as classes and subclasses, objects from those classes, inherited traits from superclasses, and so on. On the other hand, the composition is a way to compose your code structure by pulling together the bits and pieces you need. Now, obviously, this introduction does not do these two functions justice, but the main question I'm introducing is which function we should use when creating a React application, inheritance or composition. And the short answer is always choose composition over inheritance. I will not go into deep definition and comparison between these two functions, so please check the link below in the description for a detailed video about the difference between inheritance and composition. And there's also another link from React official documentation about the difference between these two functions and how React documentation recommend always choose composition over inheritance. So let's come back to these code patterns that had emerged in React, which are component with or without props, children, higher order component, and render props. The first one you are already familiar with, and it's creating a basic component. Components are the base unit for code reuse in React. Even if everything in your component is hard-coded, you can still use that component all over your app anytime you need that same HTML to be shown in a page. This is exactly like having a function that you call over and over whenever you want. Now, to make these components even more reusable, instead of hard coding stuff into them, you can pass prop to them and make them render things differently depending on which prop you pass to them. Again, this is exactly like writing a function, but now a function that takes parameter and can return different results based on the parameters that you were passed to them. Now, the other three you may not be familiar with, and in this tutorial we will be talking about higher order component. Now, as a fair warning, when React introduced HOCs in version 16.8, both higher order component and render props become a little bit outdated. Now we can do almost anything more simply using HOCs than with higher order component or render props. However, it can still be very helpful to learn these patterns, as we will likely continue to see them being used in React all over the place, and there are a lot of components and functions that are developed based on these two patterns, such as Contact API. Hopefully that wasn't too boring of a history lesson. With all that behind us, let's dive right in and start talking about React higher order components. So the idea of a higher order component originated from the idea of a higher order function. So what is a higher order function? A higher order function is a function that takes another function as a parameter, and that function is called a callback function and gets called back after doing certain tasks. An example of a higher order function is when we use an array method such as .map, .filter, or .reduce. The difference between these three methods and other array methods like a prop and push is that they all take a function as their argument. Well, the idea of a higher order component is that it is a function that take a component as its first argument instead of taking a function as its function, and return a new component that wraps the given component and provides it with extra capabilities. It is exactly a function that takes a component as input and then charges it and gives it a superpower. Soon I will explain a component that implements toggle logic and state and then pass it down and render other component and implements the try pattern. Anyhow, we will start by implementing a simple higher order component and explain how it works and introduce you to the basic syntax in order for you to become familiar with the definition of a higher order component. As you can see, here is a screenshot of higher order component in action, where here it is used to supercharge the app component. Here the higher order component is called with extra prop added. With is by convention we start the name of a higher order component with the word with. App is the component that is passed as an argument, and upgraded component is the supercharged component. As we can see here, we are exporting the upgraded component and not the app component. Anyhow, to sum up, a higher order component is a function where we will pass our component as a parameter and it will return a supercharged component. And then what we actually going to export from that file is the upgraded component. I will start by creating a simple higher order component. I'm using Code Sandbox as my development environment. You are free to use whatever development environment suits you. For example, VS Code or any other tool you want. Anyhow, we have here a simple basic React application. We have the app.js, index.js, style.js, and that's it. Okay, we'll start by creating a new file. We'll call it, as we said, by convention, the higher order component name should start with the word with, and we'll call it simple higher order component.js. Okay, I'm gonna first import React from React. And have export function with simple order component. And as we said, a higher order component is a function that takes a component as its first argument as a props. So we'll have here a component as an argument, and then here we're going to return a new function, so props, that will render the new component, alright, and with its props. Okay, since the name of the component should always start with a capital letter, we can do the following: constant component with capital C is equal to component. Alright, and here instead of rendering the small letter, we'll render the component.props. Okay, so this is just a simple component. Let's add some functionality to it for now. Let me here add a new props. I'm gonna call it title equal higher order component. Alright, now in app.js we'll first here import with simple higher order component, since it is a name export from. Okay, as we said in the definition, it is a function that takes a component as its first argument, which what we did here. It's a function that takes a component as its first argument and return a new component that wraps the given component, provide extra capabilities. The extra capabilities here, since it's just a simple component, is the title. We add here a props title. Alright, so if we go back here to app.js, how can we wrap this app with the simple higher order component? Simply by doing the following: with simple higher order component. Here it's a simple function call, as if we are calling this function and we're passing the app component as its argument. Alright, we see here there's nothing changed, but let's do a console log to see if the props is being passed. Props, okay, control save. If we go here to the console, we can see title, the prop title that we added to the higher order component. Alright, And as we can see here, index.js, this is not coming from here. We are just here rendering the app component. However, in app.js, here where we are wrapping up the app component, and with simple higher order component, here we added this extra functionality. So this is just a simple higher order component just for you to understand the meaning, to check the syntax. In the next example, we are gonna develop an advanced higher order component that will toggle state and pass functionality and so on. Alright, as we can see here, to sum up, we just created a simple higher order component that takes the apps component as an input and return a supercharged component or additional component with extra functionality, which was the title that we pass here. I know this is very simple, but it's very important for you guys to know and understand what is the higher order component and how it works. One more thing that I would like to mention here is the spread operator here, that why I'm destructuring the props here. The whole purpose of destructuring these props here using the spread operator is that just in case I am passing props or other developer pass prop to the app component from somewhere else. Let's take an example. Suppose here in index.js I wanted to pass additional props, for example my name, call it Atif, and then here, since we have here the spread operator in app.js, we'll be having access to it. Let me just here props dot my name. If we save, we can see Atif is printed here in the log. Suppose I did not pass here or destructure the props, what will happen? As you can see, return undefined, so we will not be having access to this additional props. So that's why we are destructuring the props here, so that just in case I am passing props to the app component or some other developer is working with me from somewhere else, he's trying to pass prop to the app component. So in order not to have any weird behavior of the app component, we have to destructure the props and send it back with the component. In the next example, we will develop a advanced higher order component. So let's start doing it. So now I'm going to show you an advanced higher order component. Okay, in this example we have a very basic React application that has three components: app component, favorite, and menu. Let's check first the functionality of this application. It's actually has two similar components. One of them is to toggle the state of the favorite from not favorite to favorite, like from false to true and from true to false. So if we go here to the favorite component, we see by default this function, its favorite by default is false, and then here on click we are just toggling the state of this variable from false to true, and based on that we are showing the heart. So if it is true, the heart will be red, we are showing this one, and if it is false we are showing the empty heart. Okay, so the functionality here is that we have a state variable and we have a function that toggle its state from true to false. The same thing we have here for the menu component. So if we go here inside the component, we have also a state variable called show. By default it's true, and we have a function to toggle its state from true to false or false to true. So the functionality is as the following: we can hide and show the menu, and we can see here if it is the show, it's true, it's false, we are hiding. If it's true, we are showing hide, and if it is false, we are showing show. Okay, and that's it. And on click we are just toggling the state of the state variable. All right, as we can see, both these two components have state variable, and both of them they have a toggle function, and they are both doing similar functionality. So the problem here that we have is we have a duplicate code, And this is what we talked about in the introduction, that we should use the try pattern, don't repeat yourself, okay? And one of the functionality in React that help us achieve this is the higher order component. So the goal here is to create a higher order component that will implement reusability. Alright, so we will see now how we can create this higher order component. Okay, we'll start first by creating a new file, and as we said before, the name of the file start with, and we are gonna call it toggler, okay, .js. So let's start first by import React from React. Okay, then we have export function with toggler, and as we said before, React component, a higher order component, is a function that receive a component as its input component. Alright, and then it will return a function, this probe, and then here it will return the supercharged component. Here, since we are going to use the state variables to save the value of the on state, which is true or false, we are going to create a separate React component that is called toggler. Alright, we will create it now. Since it's not created yet, it's giving an error, and then we will pass here the props. Okay, now let's take this component, export default function toggler. Alright, it receives props here. Okay, we need a state variable to store the state constant. Let's call it on and then set on. Okay, equal to use state. By default it's going to be false. Alright, we have to import here use state from React. Okay, and we need also a common function called toggle that will toggle the state variable. It's very simple, it will set on, not on, so it will just convert the value from false to true or true to false. Alright, so here we are going just to return component which is coming from props. We are passing in the props here our component. So here we have a component equal component as well and the props. So by convention we said that React component should start with a capital letter equal props.component. Alright, so here we are going to return the component, and we are going here to supercharge it by adding the state variable on, which is on, and the function that is responsible for toggling the state, which is toggle equal toggle, and destructuring the props. Alright, so what's happening here exactly? I'm gonna explain it more than one time so you guys understand it. We said higher order component is a function that receives a component as its input or variable, as we can see here. Alright, and then it returns a component which is gonna be supercharged. Alright, so here as we can see, the component that we are going to return, it contains a state, and as we all know, state variables are only accessible in React through React component. So that's why we created it here as a separate React component. We called it toggler, and for this component toggler we returned we pass our components that we received here as an input, and we destructure the props. As we said, in case we pass any props value here, we will always have access to it. This toggler component, it has a state variable and it has a function that toggle its state. Okay, and then it returns the component that we received here, which is the app component, and then it adds to it the state and the toggle, whether it is the favorite or the menu. Now let's see how we can implement this. We'll start first with the favorite. Alright, we'll start first with the favorite. We'll go to import with toggler, say it's a toggler, and here we are going to wrap the favorite with this toggler. Okay, so now since we have access to this supercharge component, we are going to have an access through props here to the on and toggle function. So let's delete this. It's gonna give an error now. So here the function is called props.toggle and the state variable is props.on. Okay, let's save and let's check if it is working. If we click on the heart, it changed to on. Click again, it toggles the state to false, true and false. So what happened here? Favorite, it became a supercharged component that have the state and toggle passing from the with toggler here. Okay, and the same thing we can do for menu. We can delete these two, and then here let's import with toggler slash with toggler. Okay, and then here, as we said, the name of the function becomes as the following. Let me just pass here the props because it's expecting a props value here. Props.toggle, and here props.on, and here as well props.on. Okay, so let's save it, and here is the same. Show menu. It's not working. We have to check why. Props.toggle. So after we adding the props here, we have also to pass it to wrap up the menu component with the toggler supercharge. So now if we click on show menu, it will work. So true, false, true, false. Alright, but by default now we can see that the menu is false and it was on before. So how we can expect to have a default value for the state variable? Okay, we can do one thing here. Inside the with toggler here, we are passing the component. We can also pass to it the default value, or we can define here an object of value instead of writing each one separate. Just in case we have more than one default value, we can pass them as an object. So let's here create an object and have default on value. Alright, bear with me. It's okay, and then we will pass this to the component toggler. Default on value equal default on value. Okay, right, and then here the default value of the use state will be props.default on value. Okay, let's go now to the favorite and then pass in this default value as an object. By default this should be false. Okay, and then in the menu default should be 2. Okay, and here we can pass more than one default value in case we have more than one state variable. Alright, so let's double check. Yeah, the error is gone. Let's save. Let's go to the menu and save this, and in favorite and save this. So if we refresh, you see by default when we refresh the menu, default value is now 2 as we did before, and the same thing for the favorite. Let's change this one to true and double check as well. Save, refresh, you see the default value is on again. Alright guys, so this is an advanced higher order component example which solve the problem that we had before, which is the duplicate code. Alright, so now we have a reusable code using dry pattern. We are writing our code once. In case we have error and in case we want to update, we can do this only in one place, as we just saw. Instead of going and add the default value in more than one place, we are just add it in one place. Alright, I know this is like if you are using React hook, which it was introduced in React version 16.8, you can do all these things with React hook very easily and very simple. But the reason why I choose to create a tutorial about the higher order component is because some people are still working into legacy code, or if you join a new company and they have some legacy code, you need to understand the higher order component. Alright, and sometimes you will find like a lot of third-party libraries, they are using higher order component and render props. So understanding the higher order component, it will be handy and it will make it easier to implement the third-party libraries. Alright, in addition to that, there are a lot of features. For example, context API, I think it's implemented over higher order component and render props. So let's just now review the application that we just created, so that to make sure that everyone understand what we just did. Before, we had a problem that the menu and the favorite component, they both have similar functionality and they implement it in its own component. So this here we had a duplicate code, and in order to make to implement the drawing pattern, we choose to use a higher order component. So we created here a higher order component that will receive a component and an object value. For example, from favorite, it's receiving the favorite component and an option default value which is false. Alright, and then it's returning a component, okay, called toggler, and the props destructuring, okay, whatever props was passed to the favorite component. Alright, what is this toggler component? Toggler component, it's just returning the same component, the favorite. It add to it a state variable and a function that toggle the value of the state. Okay, alright guys, so that's it for the higher order component. In the next week, or my next tutorial will be about render props. These are advanced topic for React code, but it is good to understand it. And I hope you like this video and you understand what is higher order component. Alright, thank you guys and see you in the next tutorial.